Hi, my name is Joshua Manthe. I am the co-founder of Buhay Sports, sports outreach ministry in the Philippines that uses basketball as a way to help churches grow and bring people to the kingdom through salvation using the game of basketball. I'm also a board member of Kids International Ministries that does a lot of things to help kids and families in the impoverished parts of the Philippines. And I've been asked to share my testimony, and I'm happy to do that for Zach, and excited about what he's doing, getting some good content out there for people to listen to. I'm not exactly sure where to start. I guess I can talk about just growing up in church. I grew up in a Baptist church, and pretty normal for kids that grew up in a church. I had a lot of understanding of the Bible. I knew a lot about sin. I knew a lot about Christ and what he had done for me. And I had a pretty naive understanding about that's just what people believed. And I went through public school and college, and I played a lot of sports. So that was generally my friend group were the guys that I played sports with, and even in that there was still a difference in the way that people believed and the way that they behaved, but generally speaking, it was still a pretty common understanding. There was at least this knowledge of who Jesus was and what he had done, and some people would say, yeah, I'm not really into that, and but it was cultural, and it was a very to me it was just life, and that was just how most people operated. I grew up in Kansas, in not a small town, but a small to medium sized town just outside of Kansas City, and I went on with that just being my understanding. In doing that, in growing up, I had a great opportunity to play basketball, and early on, God convicted my heart that He wanted me to take everything He had blessed me with and use that to further His kingdom. And so I played for Him, and I felt like He had a purpose for that in my life. So I played through high school, and I was average. But in being average, I had to work hard, and I had some height, which was again a gift and a blessing from God that helped me advance. And I went to college, and same, I found a lot of the same. I went to a Christian college, so I found a lot of the same mentalities there. People just kind of agreed that this is the thing, and they talked about it. But as you go through that, and as you go through even the struggles of being on a team and competing for playing time, and you start to learn a little bit about yourself, and you start to learn about really what God can do through even those struggles, and what He's doing in your life. I all through high school, like I said, I was fairly average, and for most of college, I was also just a guy that was there. I was a role player, and it taught me that you can't ever stop working, and you can't ever let your guard down. You got to keep getting better and keep working hard, and that's a pretty profound sports concept. But I also, as I got out of college, started to realize that it's a very Christian concept as well. And so I at the end of my senior year, I graduated, and we went on a missions trip to the Philippines. And it's the third trip I'd been on, and my wife grew up there, so we had a connection there. But I went on that trip, and God really God really broke my heart for some of the impoverished people there that I just saw, grew up in a world totally different than ours, in a third world country, but had such joy and had such a desire to know Jesus and to understand, and were so excited about learning more. And so I started to really desire to be a part of that. And I came back, and I was working a job at a retail store, and on a fast track with a college degree to move up, and it just didn't satisfy anymore. And so we committed, and that was about 17 years ago. We committed to be missionaries to the Philippines, and we've been doing that ever since. And when I got to the Philippines, into a different world, a different culture, I really found out just how little I understood about who Jesus was and what he had done for us. I lived in a place where people thought differently, and people believed different things, and people had different culture, and it was just very, very different. I got to be around other missionaries that were all great people, but a lot of them believed different things than I believed. Christians from Australia, Christians from the Philippines, Christians from Korea. And I started to realize there's a really broad spectrum. And I point that out because I think it's important to note just how wildly different we are. People from Kansas are quite a bit different than people from one of the coasts or the other, and it's even more so when you get into those worlds. And I started to see things more from the eyes of what it really meant to love people and what it really meant to care for people. I grew up with a pretty strict set of this is what's right and this is what's wrong, and I started to learn that while the sin is sin, and it is in the Bible, there are a lot of things that fall into different categories of values that are not necessarily morals. And my initial take was to judge people and to think, well, that's not right, and what and I'd look down on people, and I started to really fall into this trap where I found that my views and my background were really just the right way, and so I got to and I did that for a long time, and then I got to a point where some things happened with some brothers and I some brothers in Christ, and I found that I was really judgmental, and I was really angry, and I just didn't have any love or compassion for those people, and I failed in that, and I failed in how I treated some of them, and I failed in how I responded to it. And it was in that moment, it was a pretty significant moment in our life, where a very close friend had kind of separated from our ministry and from our association, and I just was angry, and I immediately in that moment felt God. Within that moment, felt God really convicting me about that, and over time, He convicted me about the way that I handled that and the feelings that I had, and it was this reminder He gave me that your sin is no different than His sin, and in that moment, in that stretch of time where I failed so miserably to be loving and be caring for someone who had sin in their life just like me, it was kind of an awakening to who I wanted to be because of who Jesus is. And for the last number of years, it's just been a different perspective. Whereas I grew up and this was just what you do. Christianity was just what you do. It transformed into It's not what you do, it's who you are. And Jesus tells us in his word, the most important thing you can do is love me and love others. And I realized that I had failed. I had failed in loving others in many times. And let's be honest, I still do. But the desire was no longer to just be this, just be this cultural, this is who we are, but for Christianity to take hold of my heart in a way that I loved others no matter what. And a great example of that is looking at the cross and saying, I know all the failures I've had, and I know all the things I've done. And Jesus knew that I would do those things, yet he still went to the cross and died so that I could have a relationship with him and that I could spend eternity with him. And I started to think, well, what justification do I have to in any way be angry or be upset at others? And I kind of just began this challenge to just not be angry. Not be angry at people, but to understand the hurt and the pain that brings people to sin and our damaged relationships that bring us to sin. And it's not easy, but like as I talked about, sports and the parallel that we often get in sports to let's say life and even to our Christian faith is that the work's never over. We often feel that we've been wronged, and maybe we have, but I've been so convicted and really so blessed by this heart that God gave me to just love others no matter what. When people wrong you, you love them, and because knowing that he loved me when really I was unlovable, and so it's changed the perspective in how we do ministry and how we do family and how we really do everything. Is people are going to hurt you, but no one's put me on a cross, and if he can love me enough to forgive me, and by going to the cross for me, there's really not a lot that I can't forgive others, whether they ask for it, whether they not. And I think that's what he wants from us. I think he wants us to learn about him and understand sin and understand, how the things we do and the sin in our life affects our ability to love others and affects our relationships. And so I'm just excited for what he's taught me and for what he has given me through experiences, through tough, difficult times. We often talk about sports and we love sports, and it's even a big part of in our family how we parent our children. Is we think there's so much value in it, and we often say, when you play a sport, the goal is to win. The goal is to work hard, practice, get better, and win. But something that in all of this God has really shown me is, even though the goal is winning, the failure is really where you're going to find your value. And the failures that you experience are really where you're going to be able to pull out what's happening and pull out how to improve and pull out where I need to work harder to reach those goals. And so we've kind of taken that as a philosophy with, put in everything you got. But when you fail, that's really when you're finding out what you're made of, and finding out what you need to fix, and finding out where your problems and your issues are. And so I've been really encouraged in just the word and what God has given me these last number of years. And I hope that's a blessing to you. I think we're at our strongest. We're at our most genuine when we're loving others and when we're caring for others, especially when those other people are the ones that are maybe damaging us or hurting us. And so I'd encourage you in just doing that, and finding the value of not just what Jesus did for you and what he did to pave the way for your relationship, but extending that to others. It's just a great way to emulate him and to represent him. And so I really thank you for letting me come share, and I appreciate Zach and what he's doing again. And I hope that's a blessing. Take care.